If you're interested in going skinny dipping on a public beach, but you aren't sure you should, you're listening to the right podcast. I am Fort Worth Star-Telegram columnist Mac Engel, and I'm here to give you some useful tips and advice on skinny dipping in public beaches because I just did it. Let me set the scene. It's the second week of August, and it's a serene, empty beach in Northwest Florida. Again, it's empty. This is the last night of a beach vacation, and for the fourth straight night, I've walked down to the water to enjoy a completely dark, serene beach that is empty. Empty as in, I don't see anybody else on it. Like everybody else, I love the water, and specifically, its soothing sounds. It's a low season here, so again, there's not that many people even on the beach, even in the middle of the afternoon. It's the last night of this vacation, and there's almost completely full moon over the Gulf of Mexico. So I walk out to the water to contemplate my laundry list of horrible decisions. Other than the moon, it's dark. And by dark, I'm talking like Wes Craven horror movie dark. I'm standing in about, an ankle foot of water, and I'm thinking, I should go skinny dipping. I'm 49. I should do this. No one's here. No one's going to see me. I fight with these thoughts in this momentous decision for the better part of 3 minutes before I run up out of the water, across the beach to the beach house to get a towel. Now I am all in on skinny dipping. Walk back to the beach, take off my shirt, my shorts, throw my towel to a giant pile that's about 50 yards away from the ocean, which is currently in low tide. In case you've never done this before, skinny dipping does come with a level of vulnerability that takes some getting used to. It's just you, the way God intended, and the way that nobody else really wants to see you. After about my first 10 steps on the beach, I decide, you know what? I'm gonna run. So I run down to the water. It's a dark beach. There's nobody on it. It's fine. I reach the water. I walk in. Not a problem because it's the Gulf of Mexico, and it basically feels like a warm bath. For about a minute, I'm enjoying my own personal giant saltwater bath when I look down the beach, down to the east yonder ways, and I see them, and I see the lights. There are people on this beach, a beach that has been empty every night, and these people are not that far away. It's here I need to tell you that I have a tremendous amount of respect and fear for the ocean, any ocean. I love the ocean. The ocean scares the hell out of me, and not because I'm convinced that Jaws is really a documentary. It's because I cannot see what's beneath the waterline, and specifically where the sea clown exists as he is trying to kill me. So I have a decision to make right now. I can leave the water knowing that these people who I don't know may see me and my glory. Or I can turn around and wade deeper into the dark water where that sea clown exists. I wait, and these four losers are walking so slowly, it's like they escaped from an assisted living facility. I'm in Florida. That's entirely possible. Now, even better, I look to the west, the other direction, and I see more people walking on the beach headed my way. Now I'm really stuck. I'm naked. I'm in the ocean. I'm on an empty beach that is not only not empty, but is becoming an MTV spring break South Beach party scene hub. And I'm the keynote speaker at the 2022 Middle-Aged Man Naked Convention. So I'm standing there and I'm really irritated. Now I'm mad. At first it was kind of funny. Now I'm mad. I'm not mad at myself. This isn't my fault. I did the right thing. I did the YOLO thing. Who knows how many more days I'm going to have. So why would I deny myself the pleasure of standing in this warm water naked? I did the right thing. This is their fault. Those two groups of people who are walking forever, which leaves me crouched down here in the water so they can't see all of me and specifically my junk. I don't need any more judgment. Finally, after what felt like an hour, but was actually closer to 7 or 8 minutes, they walk on. And I think, okay, There's enough space here that I can leave this water, get up to my towel, and cover myself. That's what I think. And I have to admit, I was also at a point where I no longer really cared what they thought. I'm in Florida, and it's not as if they're going to recognize me. What are they going to do? Put it on Instagram? So I do finally leave the water, run up the beach, get to my towel, and finally security comes back to me because I've put on shorts to cover my junk. Thank God. I turn back around and I see those groups of people and they have moved on. But I can still see their flashlights. And their flashlights aren't white bulbs, they're red bulbs. And in that moment, it hits me. It hits me why they were on that beach with those red lights walking just so slowly. Because they were looking for sea turtles. And you know what? There's a turtle on the beach that night. My guest today for this latest episode is a former NFL offensive lineman who played at Penn State University before he moved on to the NFL, where he played for 5 seasons for the New England Patriots, Arizona Cardinals, and San Diego Chargers. He won a Super Bowl with Tom Brady. In fact, a lot of people say Tom Brady wouldn't have that Super Bowl ring without this particular guest. I'm not sure who says that, but I just did. This guy went through absolute hell to play on those seasons, and he will talk about it here on this episode. He's currently a fixture in Southern California, where he is a big part of the Big Rich, TD, and Fletch morning show in San Diego. He's funny as hell. He's bright. He's genuine. And damn it, he's pretty sexy. He is Rich Ohrnberger. That is a good, fine head of hair you got right there.
It's hanging in there. That's all I can ask for.
How old are you, Rich? Are you 40 yet?
No, I'm 36, but I started going gray at 16.
You started going gray at 16?
I saw my first gray hairs at 16. My mom, I guess, went gray really early, and we didn't know that because she dyed her hair our whole young life. So I thought you had brown hair. And then she goes, oh, yeah. She's like, that's on my side. And I'm just like, well, was anybody going to tell me? So I had to develop this dazzling personality as a result of all that.
Well, like, how much did you get made fun of when you were a kid for having gray hair at 16?
Well, it didn't go completely gray. It really, I mean, it's taken its time, but at this point, I mean, I'm pretty much like, I just comb my hair and use some water and gel. So it looks a little darker on top, but I mean, I'm gray, all the way gray now. But if you go back and look at pictures, like, it's almost more noticeable in person than it was in pictures. Like it really kind of progressed slowly. So I bought just enough time to get my wife on the hook.
Did you ever think, like, when you look at it, how often do you look at yourself in the mirror? Like, you know what, George Clooney looks pretty much like that's pretty much Clooney hair. No one's making fun of him.
No, it's funny you mention that because I think there used to be such a stigma around gray hair that it was like it made you old. And then what happened was at some point, I mean, it worked out to my benefit. At some point, gray hair kind of became cool or distinguished, and so I was like, whoa, okay, now that's working. Yeah, that's what I am, is a distinguished gentleman. Yeah.
That's it. I haven't, you and I've talked off and on for the better part of a couple of years, and I don't think I haven't asked you this because normally you're the one asking me the questions about the Cowboys and stuff. What does your last name mean, Ohrnberger? What is that?
I remember looking it up a really, really long time ago.
You can make it up. Make it up.
Yeah, and I think it means. I do think it means this is the truth. Gosh, it's something like Baron of Wood. Okay, so yeah,
you got a winner. Baron of Wood.
There's an entendre hidden there somewhere. Yeah, so
no one can see that. So, Rich, how many years have you been out of the NFL now?
Since 2014. So quick math, 6 years. 6 years. 6 years.
Okay, so
no,
it's 8. I didn't want to be rude, but it's 8. It's fine. Don't worry about it. When you left the NFL, you wrote, well, it was after that when Andrew Luck retired. you wrote something that went viral about your injury history and what it took for you to play a game. And it was really well done and it was really revealing. And I recommend anybody look up Rich Ohrnberger, Baron of Wood, and injury history, and you can find it on Google. It's really good. You're in your mid 30s now. How are you doing physically, in relation to all the injuries and surgeries that you endured from your football career?
I'm really good.
Oh,
I appreciate you asking. It's such a subjective thing, pain. I think I feel to a greater or lesser extent pain every day. It's just a matter of how much and the variety. Sometimes it's you sleep funny on a shoulder, both of which have been, surgically repaired, or you tweak your back picking up one of the kids, which they're getting bigger by the day, man. I got a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they're not getting any lighter. And or you go hard at the beach, you're digging in the sand with the youngsters and all that stuff, or whatever it is. You could pay for things a little bit more as a younger man than maybe you would have had you gotten into finance, or or done some of the things that some of my buddies, my peers, are up to these days. But I wouldn't trade it for the world, because the experiences that I've gotten to enjoy while enduring some of the injuries that I had to suffer through, I'm just I still sometimes kind of look back on all that and wonder if it's a life I actually lived. It sort of feels like I read that book once and then put it down, and I'm trying to remember bits and pieces from it for the book report. But yeah, it's I'm good overall, health wise. Like, you have good days and bad days like anybody else, but I'm good.
you played 5 seasons. And when I was I'm never quite sure about this one because I don't know what the qualifications are. Did you play long enough to qualify for the NFL's long-term pension and all of those different benefits that come with playing either 4 seasons or a certain number of games on the active roster?
Yeah, yeah. Fortunately, and I didn't even realize it until I had a teammate who leaned over to me during my fourth year, like halfway through my fourth season in the NFL, and goes, "Hey, how many years have you been in yet?" And I'm like, 4. I said, "This is my fourth season." And he goes, "Congratulations." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And it was exactly 4 games and 5 games into my fourth season. He goes, "You're fully vested. You're fully accrued. You get everything retirement than anybody else would." And I was like, "Oh my God." And when you first start, you hear about pensions and you hear about things like that, and your hope is just to keep in the league long enough, especially as a fourth rounder, just survive the roster cuts and stick around long enough, or start a whole bunch of games and be undeniable to last that long. But I didn't even realize it, and yeah, it's important. It's an important threshold to cross, because as you know, but many people might not. If you don't get fully vested, you don't enjoy all the post career benefits that comes with some of the pension things and the HRA accounts, or some of the medical benefits. So it's an important threshold to get beyond. And yeah, what's funny is I only played 5 seasons because I spent a full season on IR before they changed the rules where you could come back off the IR. But it counts. An injured reserve year counts towards your vestment, so that helped.
Rich, in your estimation, how many guys that did you play with were were smart about their money and smart about what they needed to look beyond? Because you're a bright guy. I've followed you for a long time, just in social media worlds, and you're kind of a player, an ex-player who stood out as somebody who was probably aware when they were younger. How many teammates did you have who just had no clue about how quickly 6 figures or 7 figures can turn into zero?
Oh man, a lot, and it's a sad reality. A lot of them did. I think actually we don't cheerlead loud enough the success stories where guys spun off a successful NFL career, or a career into building a business that they're proud of, or further educating themselves and getting into the career or the job that they always hoped that they would carry even before football factored into that thought process. And but there are also those tragic stories of guys who had immense wealth and just didn't know what to do with it and squandered it. I'm fortunate because honestly, and it's not because I'm an intelligent guy or anything like that, because I don't even think I think I listen. I think I'm a pretty quick learner and I listen, especially when I think somebody's smarter than me. I shut up and I listen. Because I wasn't financially literate when I came into the NFL. I had only ever received paychecks under the table. I barely had an active uh, um, bank account by the time I graduated college. And I'll give you a story just to exemplify how completely illiterate I was. Uh, I got my signing bonus for being a fourth rounder in two large chunks. And that's pretty typical. Sometimes, if it's a small enough signing bonus, they'll just give it to you in one payment. Sometimes it could be agreed to by you and the club that it's going to be one payment. But a lot of rookies, you're not negotiating like when they're going to pay you. You're just happy to be paid. And I was one of those. So they gave it to me in two chunks. One was in the spring at some point, and then the other one was a couple of games into the fall or something like that. That first check that I got came in May, I want to say. And I had received the check, and the first thing I did is I called my financial advisor. And he wasn't around, I guess, or didn't answer the phone right away. And I'm sitting in the car and I'm staring at this check. And, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I am floored. I'm just, what do I do with this? I didn't leave the parking lot until I heard from my financial advisor.
Were you scared?
Not scared, but it was more like, do I bring this to a normal bank?
Yeah.
I called him up and that was my intention of the phone call. So he finally calls me back. I'd made my way back to my apartment, but he goes, hey, what's going on? I was like, hey, I just want to let you know I got my signing bonus check, and it's a pretty big check. I was like, so do I just like put it in the regular mail and send it to you, or do I FedEx it? Like, do I need a special envelope? And he's like, why would you do that? And I'm just like, well, I mean, I don't know. I was like, because on your end, then you guys will put it in my account, or go through whatever proper channels. And he just sounded, there was like all these pauses on the phone as he was trying to understand how little I knew about all this. And he goes, Rich, he was like, you could bring it to the bank. I was like, well, what bank? And he goes, well, where do you bank? And I was like, you mean like, where do I have a checking account? And he goes, yeah, Rich. And I was like, oh, Bank of America. And he goes, yeah, so bring it to Bank of America. He was like, look, I'm pulling up your file right now. He was at home, so he's like pulling up my file on his computer from home to get to his work. And he was like, yeah. He was like, okay, bring it to Bank of America. He was like, tell them to put in your checking. And he gave me the last four numbers of that account. He was like, tell them to put in that account. He goes, and then it'll clear in a couple of days and you'll be all right. I said, is that all I have to do? I just bring it to him? And he goes, have you ever deposited a check before? And I said, no. And he goes, well, you're going to, all right. He was like, flip over the check. So
you never endorsed a check?
I never endorsed a check in my life. He was literally walking me. I was like, okay, RICH, I mean, legit, no. But so anyways, but that's the platitude that a lot of guys start at, because I grew up working in a deli in high school, cutting cold cuts for people on Sundays, probably eating my paycheck in food, and getting paid in cash in an envelope. So I had zero, and the only money that ever hit my account was my parents transferring money from their Bank of America account into mine during my college years. Like when I ran out of toilet paper, or I lied about that and needed beer money. So that was the extent of financial literacy I had. And I was fortunate to surround myself with people who really understood how to invest appropriately and how to budget appropriately. And there weren't too many requests of me from family members, which is a huge part of this, because you feel indebted to the people who helped you get to where you are. And you see a lot of guys get taken advantage of because of that. And I really look, I'm not a smart guy when it came to money. I think of myself as much more educated now. But at that point in my life, absolutely not. And I'm pretty sure I could have very easily been taken advantage of and been a statistic, but I was fortunate that I had good people around me.
I normally tiptoe around this question with former players, but I think you'll be honest about it. Is steroid use and HGH use prevalent in the National Football League or in major college football?
I'm sure it is, and this is the God's honest truth. I haven't been around a lot of it, which is, it probably sounds odd, but I have to imagine if once you dive into that world,
Yeah.
like I'm sure you find out a lot of guys, you know what I mean, do.
Yeah.
But I was always so afraid of getting caught. And I don't get me wrong, that was mainly the reason. Like if there was a way to guarantee me that going through any lengths would make me just an infinitesimal amount better than the guy across from me, I probably would have partaken. But I was so terrified of staining all the hard work that I had done, that with that rule in place, I just didn't want to even bother taking the chance. But look, I mean, it's obvious based on the PED testing every year, somebody gets popped for something they're not supposed to be taking. So there is a culture of that in football, in college football. But because I didn't partake, I really didn't know too many people who were actively doing it. I would only hear stories of guys who were. So there is 100% going to be guys in every single locker room, and this is at the college level and the pro level doing it. I just wasn't exposed to it all that often, or
Do you
at
do you
all.
do you care? I mean, do you care if guys are using it?
No.
I don't.
I mean, now here's the way I look at it. We all cheat. We all cheat a little bit. Like there's margins everywhere. Like I was an offensive lineman. There's rules that say you're not allowed to hold. And I held on every single play I played. And I promise you that, Mac. Every single play. And I got away with it most of the times, and sometimes I didn't. Now, if I was a much better player, would my holding calls keep me out of the Hall of Fame one day? No. But so those were, what's the word? That was the risk I was willing to take. There are certain guys who that's the risk they're willing to take, is if I could just be good enough to earn this money on this next contract, if I could be just a hair stronger, recover a little bit faster from this injury, or run a little bit faster, you know, then, and they're willing to take the risk of getting caught. And I just never was. So I don't look at them as bad people, and I don't really mind that they're doing it. I just could never.
You know, I don't really care anymore if a guy does it. I don't know if I ever really cared. The thing that concerns me, and you're a dad, I think the thing that concerns me is that the 16-year-old who doesn't know any better and he gets his hands on it and he's doing it, and he might be doing some real damage to his body at an important developmental stage of his life. But I don't know how you possibly, I mean, I know you're like, oh, parents, do your job. There's a lot of good parents out there trying to do their job. I just don't know how you police that.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I wish I would have tagged my answer with that part, because I completely agree with everything you just said. I think I don't really mind any of it. For an adult, you're making decisions. I mean, look, if you're old enough to pick up a gun and go fight for this country, and you're crazy enough to play this sport of football that I fell in love with, and you got to be somewhat crazy to play it, and you're willing to risk whatever long-term health effects, could come from using steroids illicitly during that career. I'm not going to get in your way, and I don't think I really care. But I do appreciate that point you just made about kids and about how athletes are role models, and especially professional athletes. There's no question that I looked up to Michael Jordan when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I was playing driveway basketball. If you asked me when I was 12 what sport I was going to play, professional basketball. I was convinced of it.
I'm a little surprised you didn't make it.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, because
coach screwed you. Just to get playing time.
When you look at my body type,
there's no doubt
you think is shooting guard.
Like, look at Luka Doncic.
Oh no, yeah, no. I mean, that guy's a bull. I mean, but even him, right? Like what a fascinating and kind of, I guess the best way to call him is like this unicorn. Like,
Yeah.
the size and the strength and the ability and the balance. And that's the way I looked at Jordan when I was a kid. I'm sure a lot of kids who grew up in the 90s looked at him that way. And you're just, I mean, I grew up in New York. My father was a New York Knicks fan, and I had Chicago Bulls starter jackets and
Really?
Chicago Bulls bedspread, and and if I would have found out that he cheated to get to where he was, I'm sure, and it was explained to me that way. I'm sure it would have changed my whole opinion on it, right? And it would have tainted, how I did model. I can't. I had the tongue out in the driveway. I'm shooting, the layups, and everything. I'm sure it would have had some sort of effect. So that is the one aspect of all of this conversation that I completely agree with you. And I'm raising two young sons now, and one day they're going to get into sports and maybe have some sort of clue as to what dad did. Um, and yeah, I hope those guys they look up to, they do it, quote unquote, the right way, and they never get involved in all that stuff.
You played in New England. You played with Bill Belichick. You played with Tom Brady, both of whom have reputations that are unlike few others in sports, really. Who was more intimidating to be in a meeting room with, Bill Belichick or Tom Brady?
Without a question, Bill Belichick. But Tom was intimidating because it snuck up on you with Tom. Like meeting him, he was such a kind and warm human being. Like you talked to him in the weight room, he knew your name immediately. He knew the name of every single person
Uh,
who walked through the door in the facility. It almost felt like it was his job to be like the facility greeter. Like, did he get a bonus for that? Like,
it's like the Walmart greeter.
yeah, like yeah, he put on the vest and he was out front. He like put the carriages back in the cart corral. Yeah, it was just like I mean he just was, every detail mattered to him, including making sure to know who the incoming rookies were, even if they were going to be just warm bodies for training camp. He didn't care. He knew who you were, and so as a result, you formed this automatic respect and kinship with him, and respect for him. Now, once you got to the playing field, if you were being relied on in any capacity, and it didn't matter if you were going to be, snapping the football to him, or on the offensive line with the starting group and blocking for him, or if you with one of the other guys, backup quarterback, whatever it was, he would call you out directly. If he knew that you screwed stuff up, he would point it out to you, be like, all right, we got to go, we got to do it again because we're not picking up Sam blitzes anymore, and you're just like, wait, what? And
But
then,
would he call out a guy by name, or was it
oh
that?
yeah,
Oh, he would. Okay.
yeah. I mean, and I think he did it more to the guys he knew he could do it to. So put everybody else on warning. Meaning, if he had you designed as a guy who was mentally tough enough, like for example, like a Julian Edelman,
Mhm.
who he would scream his name, Jules, and like it would be this, bah, 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 it's like, safety's coming down this side. You got to break back out, and it's got to be now. Again, let's go, and and then just like a coach, you're lining back up, and he usurped the offensive coordinator to run the play again because he wants it perfect, because he wants the timing down, so he knows that hot route's going to be there, or that option route, the correct option was chosen, whatever. It was, every detail was important to him, because obviously I had jumped in the fray in 2009. So he had been there 10 years already, won 3 Super Bowls. He had known exactly how important every single one of those practice moments were and how fleeting they are. You can't just say, oh, you know what? We'll correct it in the film room. No, right now, we got the time right now. And while, especially with a young guy, like while your brain is still making all of these connections, and let's learn it right way the first time. This way, if it's screwed up later on, it's on you, because not only did you steal away the rep where you screwed it up the first time, but you made us do it a second time. And if you screwed up in the game, you've screwed us, and it's your fault. That's the level of accountability you felt like was coming down on you when Tom Brady was on the field and calling you out for anything, right? Now, Bill, there was less of a comfort, like, because there was a huge professional buffer between you and Bill as a player to a coach. At least I felt that way. Now, he had a personality, and he would be very willing to chop it up with you a little bit, here and there, but it was mostly business. And so it was difficult to know exactly where you stood with him. So your goal every single day was just don't get called out by him. Just be memorable, because you're one of the guys who shows up and does it right every single day. You don't want to show up on the screen in the team meeting room when he puts up some lowlights from a practice or a game, because that was the absolute worst.
Rich, I had a friend of mine who knows him a little bit on a personal level and said he's obviously a very, very bright guy, but he said the best way that he thought to describe him was that he was a little bit of a social misfit. You could take that in a lot of different ways. Do you feel like that was a fair characterization of his personality, that just socially he's just a little awkward?
He's found his perfect little rabbit hole, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, football, when it comes to football, it's savantism with Bill Belichick. It's like, it's like going to one of those movies where they're playing the montage of the tortured genius who's going through all the paperwork, and then taking the test, or some musician who just looks at the keys on a piano and just, like, where the rest of us see a box with strings and keys, they see music. Like, that's that. I think just the way he was raised by his dad, and who was a football man and a historian, at least as it it's been described to me. I've never met him, but he fell right into that pathway, man. And so in his realm, like, when you talk football with him, there's no, like, he knows everything. You know what I mean? So every question you have can be answered. If you're intelligent enough to, like, hang on the level with him, like, you could go as deep and as far as you want to. If you know a little bit about history, he'll educate you even further than you could ever imagine. But I think that's the most comfortable place for him to exist, and so that's the reason why he's made a career out of it. I mean, and it's become a family affair. Now his son's on the coaching staff, and I think to a certain extent, I'm sure he feels most comfortable communicating with his dad the same way Bill communicated with his dad, through the language of football.
You played for three different organizations. You go from New England to San Diego when they were still in San Diego. You spent a year with the Cardinals too. I think people like me in the media make a lot out to do with this, and I don't know if we really know what we're talking about sometimes, because I think some just depends on the particular reporter. We can get kind of close, but you played for him. Is there really that much difference between one NFL organization and another, or are they kind of the same?
Oh, yeah, they're so different.
Okay.
Yeah, just from logistically how they handle certain things, the level of importance that they put on certain things, and it could be things that you may not even think of, like, how we're going to execute our travel plan. There are certain teams I was on where nothing was explained, and you just sort of followed the herd, because everybody's been used to it. And then there are certain, head coaches who would literally take meeting time to explain exactly how everything is going to go, from the moment you leave the practice field, to packing your bags for the equipment trainers, to the TSA pre-screening, to the food that's going to be available to you on the travel. Like, it really is through the lens of what head coach you have, and then also the level of contribution the owner is willing to make. Because you look at it from any business standpoint. You walk into certain chain restaurants, and certain regional owners, they run a really good shop, and it just feels like the service is better, and the food's better, and the environment's cleaner. And then the other regions or other restaurants you walk into, even though it's under this banner, this national restaurant chain banner, you have a terrible experience, and the bathrooms are dirty. Like, it's the same thing with these 32 NFL franchises. There are certain places that really pay attention to details, and there's others that don't. And sometimes it's incumbent on the head coach. Sometimes the head coach is fighting the tide. Sometimes the head coach is getting more involvement from the owner than they want. It just depends on the owner, the relationship he wants with the team, with the head coach, with the coaching staff. And it varies wildly from one team to the next.
When you played in the league, you played in playoff games, you played in a Super Bowl. After the game starts, ball goes up in the air, 1st and 10 on the 20. Does the game feel any different than week 15 in the regular season or week 5 once you get into the actual game, even if it says wild card, divisional round, Super Bowl, any of it?
Not really. No. Yeah, that's actually a really interesting thing about sports. Like, also that's part of the reason why I was so drawn to sports is I felt like there was a real peace when you were so completely focused on the task at hand. Like, there's such a quiet in your brain, even though it's such an insanely loud and physical and violent sport, especially football. But all sports are that way. I mean, basketball, there's whistles blowing, the sneakers are screeching, you have fans in the background. I mean, baseball, you're dealing with just ambient noise constantly. But for whatever reason, as soon as it's your turn to be on the field, it's your job to be on the field. You just get locked into this place that I'll never be able to replicate again. You just get lost. You just get completely lost. The closest thing that I'll compare it to for somebody who's trying to understand what it feels like is, a lot of people play video games, and I sort of feel like they get lost the same way an athlete can. Like, you sit in front of that screen, and all of a sudden, you started playing, and the sun was out, and then all of a sudden it's 10 o'clock at night, and you're like, whoa, what happened? Like, time just sort of disappears. And that's what being in a game. And honestly, I don't have a particularly strong photographic memory. Like, if you start, you kind of have to start me down the path to get me remembering certain plays in a game. There are certain guys who remember every single moment. They remember the time on the clock, how many timeouts we had. They remember, which safety was moving down toward the line of scrimmage. They had this conversation with the official right before the ball was snapped. It's like, how do you remember all that? For me, it was this opportunity to just concentrate on one thing at a time with all of my energy, what my mental bandwidth. And so, yeah, even in the biggest of moments in my career, it was just another play. It was another play. It was another play. It was another play. You lose sight of the moment and you just get trapped into the game.
You recently told a story about when you were with the Patriots and went viral about electing to get into a car crash rather than be late for a Patriots practice and incur the wrath of Bill Belichick. When you did get in that, I love the story, by the way. It's the most original thing I've ever heard in my life. But there was one part of like, how much damage did you do to the car? Like, was there any part of a cost benefit analysis? You're like, okay, I'm going to get fined $1,000 if I'm late, but if I wreck this car, it's only going to be $350. Like, did you do any of that math in your head at all?
Yeah. Well, oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad. This is the first person I've talked about this a lot over the past month, because you're right. I was just doing my radio show and telling this story like I would, because I think somebody got caught speeding. I think it was Marquise Brown. Marquise Brown got caught speeding during Arizona Cardinals training camp, and he got caught at like 7 a.m. on a Wednesday.
Right.
I was like, Buddy
was flying, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Dangerous, right?
Yep.
But Buddy wasn't coming home from a party or anything like that. He was late for practice. And so I was like, look, I've been there. And I began telling the story. But yeah, when I was rolling down that hill and realized, I looked at the clock on my car, I was like, oh no, I'm going to be late by 10 minutes. Like, there's just no conceivable way I get there. Even by the skin of my teeth, there's no chance. It's over. My career's potentially over. I start thinking about the deli I was telling you about, cutting cold cuts again. Like, I figure I'm going to have like a Marble Red hanging out of the corner of my mouth. I'm going to be, hucking somebody's bologna, just telling them about, yeah, I once had a chance with the Patriots. Like, that was going to be my life. Like, that right, flashing before your eyes. And then as it dawns on me that maybe if as I'm cruising down this hill, I get into enough of a car accident to justify pulling the cars over to the side of the road, that would be a valid enough excuse to escape accountability for my lateness. Maybe this will work. And then as I'm cruising into this bumper, I'm looking at my speedometer. I'm just thinking like, all right, 10 miles an hour feels perfect. And then at the last second, I kind of kicked the wheel even more to the left because I was off the passenger side bumper where I was going to make contact because I didn't want to damage my fog light. That's how much attention I was paying to what I was doing. And so a perfect like basketball sized dent in the front bumper, right on the plastics part. It just caved in perfectly. And by the way, the van I hit showed zero damage. Right on this like 1980s Astro van rusted, metal bumper. This whole van, it looked like it had been through, I don't even know, a war. It was dilapidated, but we pull over, and the part of the story the one part of the story that still to this day I feel the worst about was when I have like a visceral feeling, like I can feel the belly dropping out right now when I realized it was this tiny ancient old man who creeped out of the front of the car. I'm just like, golly, he had to be like 78, 80 years old, a little bit hunched. He had this big white beard, and he asked
me, "You hit Santa Claus?"
I think it was Santa or his brother. You know what I mean? Like, and I know I'm going straight to hell because like as soon as this happened, like the heavens opened up and the New England skies start pouring torrential rain on top of us. And I'm just thinking like, I'm about to get struck by lightning. Like this is what happens to sinners. And here it comes. But I helped Father Time back to his car and I gave him every dollar in my pocket. I had a few $100 and thanked him profusely. And he had no idea why. I was like, listen, I'm late for work. I was like, but you have no idea how great it was to meet you. And hundreds of dollars, just like, here you go. Spend it on the car, spend it on yourself. I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful rest of your life.
That's a great story. I don't know. I mean, there was one other thing I want to ask you about because you're in the media now, you're a player, and players during their careers usually will develop feelings about the media, usually specific members. Some guys don't want to talk at all. Some guys do. I'm not sure what the Patriots relationship with the media because of Belichick's that reputation has always been kind of frosty and just don't give him anything, don't say anything. Now that you're on the other side of this big giant circus, how would you critique the media that covers and by extension markets the NFL? Like, what do we do well, and what do you say? You guys suck. You're way wrong here, here, and here.
Boy, that's such a good question too. I guess where it starts is even when you're dealing with a player in a locker room atmosphere, it's not the zoo. You know what I mean? Like these are people who may have just had a tough practice or may have something serious going on at home that they're not sharing. So there's this automatic familiarity that a lot of members of the media have with players where they're allowed to walk right up into your personal space. They don't have to ask if you really want to talk or it's not really your choice. Like as they're saying, hey, could I get you for 3 minutes? The cameraman's already got the camera up on his shoulder and the lights are on and you're in your towel and you're like, yeah, let me throw a shirt on. It's just like, and if you don't, you're the jerk. Yeah. And so that was one of the things that you saw a lot. The guys and the women who went out of their way to establish a relationship with you, who came over to you and just chopped it up with you, BS'd with you, even when they weren't looking for a scoop or a story, just because they saw you from across the room, just like, hey, you remember we were talking about, you played lacrosse, right? Okay, I'm glad I remember that way because my nephew just started playing it. Everything he said is true. Like, he loves it and, it's physical enough and, soccer was too boring. And all of a sudden you're like, man, I'm connecting with somebody, with a person. It's not just a job. It's like how you would treat a coworker. And that's what we are. The media and athletes, you're truly coexisting together because obviously the media has anybody who works in the media, I should say, has a job to tell the story of the fan, of the player to the fan, or the fan back to the player, frankly, because we read it too. And our job, part of our job description is to work well with that arm of the business. And so that's one of the things, is never lose sight of the fact that you're dealing with people. I think especially with football, I think that that gap feels wider because it is such a gladiatorial sport, especially at that level. I think sometimes it's difficult for people to treat us more than like, my goodness, these are like mercenaries. They're going out there, and it's like, who knows if this guy is even going to be available next week. He could tear his knee apart this week, so I better get talking to him right now. It's just so, but to never lose sight of the fact that you're dealing with people. And then the longer you talk to somebody, almost always, because everybody has a story to tell, you're going to unearth something you didn't know, and something fascinating, or something interesting. And that would be the biggest critique. And frankly, it's one that, even as a former athlete, I have to remind myself, like, when you walk in, the first thing you need to say to these guys is, introduce yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and connect with them on a personal level before you do anything professional.
Rich, I could talk to you all day. I really appreciate your time and how interesting and forthright and funny you are. Thank you very much.